Marvel, Humanoid Magic Weapon Unleashes Unlimited Power. Episode 21. It turned out that after Gwen was taken out by Parker, he couldn't rest assured and turned back to see what was going on. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, a hideous-looking and incomparably strong lizard pounced. Frightened, she lost her face, closed her eyes, and waited for death. For a long time I haven't felt the pain I imagined. When he opened his eyes, it turned out that Fang Tian was blocking in front of him. Professor Lizard saw that it was Fang Tian again. His figure turned in midair. He turned around, his strong hind limbs were forceful. He kicked on Fang Tian's shoulders, accelerated himself, broke the wall on the other side, turned and fled. This series of actions is dizzying for those who watch. When Parker chased after him, he saw Professor Lizard's tail, which had not yet recovered to half the size, disappearing at the entrance of the sewers. Fang Tian pulled out his calf that had fallen into the ground. The feet were unharmed, but the shoes were tattered. Gwen originally thought that she was dead, but she didn't expect Fang Tian to stand in front of her and block the mortal blow for her. She didn't know Fang Tian's ability. She thought that Fang Tian was dead, and tears had dripped down. Just 3 seconds of sadness. I heard a familiar voice. That lizard has already run away. What are you crying at this time? Gwen looked up in disbelief. It was really Fang Tian, all over his body, except for his tattered clothes. Where was there a trace of scars? She burst into tears and laughed. Nasty. It scared me to death. I thought you were dead. As he spoke, he threw himself into Fang Tian's arms. Fang Tian comforted. It's okay, this little lizard can't hurt me yet. Gwen still hugged him. It took a while for her reluctance to let go. Carefully pinched Fang Tian's skin, felt this warm feeling, and blinked his big blue eyes. Strange, it feels the same as ordinary people. Why is the defense so high? Fang Tian smiled. If you are full of heart state, how can I hold you? Parker turned back at this time, interrupted the two, and said worriedly, I ran away for Professor Lizard again. Something is not good. The sound of loudspeakers also sounded outside the school. People inside, listen, the building has been surrounded by the police. Surrender immediately, you have no way to escape. The 3 looked at each other, and Fang Tian said, Gwen, you go out. Parker and I will go after Professor Lizard. Gwen was a little worried. You guys have to be careful. Fang Tian said, it should be Professor Lizard who is careful. You didn't see it just now. He was beaten by me on the ground. Gwen thought about it too, nodded in agreement. Fang Tian and Parker followed the professor to the sewers. Fang Tian saw that the time was almost up, as if he suddenly remembered something, and said to Parker, oops, I remembered something. Do you remember the canary equipment in the Osborne building? If Professor Lizard gets this device, the whole city will be out of luck. As soon as Parker heard this, he felt that with Professor Lizard's IQ, this matter was likely to happen, and he was also anxious. Fang Tian said, it's better for me to stay here and search. You hurry up and go to Osborne to make sure nothing goes wrong. Anyway, this lizard professor can't help me. Parker thought for a moment. Good idea, then you be careful. I don't want my best friend to get hurt or anything. Fang Tian patted his chest. If you want me to get hurt, this lizard is not qualified enough. Parker turned and ran towards the sewer exit. Fang Tian also sped up. At this time, Fang Tian's 5 senses had already surpassed ordinary people by unknown times, and the traces left by Professor Lizard's size were as obvious as light bulbs in his eyes. Soon, he arrived at Professor Lizard's lair. Professor Lizard had just gotten up at this time and was ready to go. Fang Tian shouted, people can go, the medicine remains. Professor Lizard's face was fierce, and he saw that the 2 sides were about to fight. Fang Tian shouted again, you think about it, Spider-Man has rushed to the Osborne mansion to protect the canary equipment. If you delay some time here, your wishful thinking will not be achieved. Professor Lizard hesitated even more. Seeing this, Fang Tian said again, you can leave 1 potion. There is a potion as an antigen, plus canary equipment. It is enough to cover the whole city. Professor Lizard listened to this, and was obviously puzzled. What is your purpose? How repeatedly, just now you were still stopping me. And now, since you already know my plan, why are you ready to let me go? Fang Tian's face showed impatience. What are you doing so much? Just say, do you want to leave now? Professor Lizard hesitated for a moment, took out a potion from his backpack, put down the others, faced Fang Tian vigilantly, and slowly retreated out. Out of this space, it finally turned around, landed on all 4s, and accelerated out. Fang Tian picked up the backpack and opened it to see that there were 7 or 8 lizard potions inside. This gain is not small, and it can add 30 or 40 people to his strength. This time, he didn't even drink it. The space in his body opened, so he rolled the potion into it, and directly refined the potion with the test tube. Episode 22. Feeling the growing power in his body, Fang Tian grinned and laughed silently. In fact, with Fang Tian's second-order magic weapon level body at this time, it was already equivalent to the foundation building realm of an immortal cultivator. It stands to reason that people in this realm are immortal cultivators who have just glimpsed the door, and the mana in their bodies is operating, and there are many spells that can be cast. Even the body has transcended mortals, raising hands and strength, with thousands of pounds. But Fang Tian, having trained himself into a magic weapon, the means of ordinary immortal cultivators naturally could not be used. He could only use various magical powers based on the runes condensed in his body, and he was not as diverse as the means of immortal cultivators. There were gains and losses. What Fang Tian lost was the diversity of means, and what he gained was an incomparably strong body defense and strength. On the one hand of defensive power, the enemy's power attacks on him, which is equivalent to tempering his body for him, coupled with the instinct to refine all things, how to think, it is also more gain than loss. On the side of strength, thousands of pounds and tens of tons, the difference is more than 10 times. Therefore, he is very satisfied with his body. New York City, today the sun is shining, the blue sky is like a wash. Between the high-rise buildings, a red and blue figure is advancing rapidly. This figure was tightly wrapped in tights, even the eyes. With both wrists raised, 2 strands of spider silk shot out. The end of the spider silk automatically opened like a small hand and stuck tightly to the outer wall of the high-rise building. With the arm forced, the figure swung into the distance from a height. On the road below, vehicles come and go like beetles. One by one, the advancing beetles were overtaken by him, showing his impressive speed. At this time, Spider-Man was full of anxiety. If Fang Tian's guess was hit, Dr. Lizard got the canary equipment. That would be no less for New York than the catastrophe of war in the heart of the city. I don't know how many people will die in such a catastrophe. Below the road, among the beetles coming and going, a policeman is directing traffic. Inadvertently, he looked up and saw that the top of his head was echoing with the Spider-Man wanted by the police. Immediately took out the walkie-talkie and reported to the police department. I found Spider-Man, he went south. The police department received the report and immediately dispatched all personnel. Hundreds of policemen, fully armed, wearing body armor, bulletproof helmets, and armed with firearms, surrounded Spider-Man from all directions. Even, the police dispatched police helicopters to track Spider-Man's movements. Hundreds of police officers ambushed in front of Parker's advance route, some lurking on the rooftops, some under the windows of rooms, and some on both sides of the road. The anxious Spider-Man did not notice the abnormality and crashed headlong into the heaven and earth web specially prepared for him. With the order of the action leader, the police on the side opened fire first. Parker was anxious and found no ambush. He was suddenly attacked, but fortunately, the spider sense and sensitive skills saved him once. I saw Spider-Man deftly turn over in midair, already attached to the wall of the roadside building, and dodged this sudden blow. Looking back, under the dark road, on the roof of the building in the blind corner, behind the window, bright or dark, there are police everywhere. Spider-Man had no intention of entanglement, jumped up hard, and his figure bounced onto the billboard in front of him. At the same time, there are already several more bullet holes in the wall behind him. Acting like an acrobat, Parker flashes past several billboards and outdoor stairs, reflecting him flickering on and off. After a few gunshots, the billboard that Parker skimmed was smashed, and the beaten burst open, crackling with electric sparks. The sound of a police horn sounded around. Spider-Man, you have been surrounded by the police. You have no way to escape. Surrender immediately. Parker is also a good citizen. Even if he is ambushed by hundreds of police officers for no reason, he has no idea of retaliation. Ignoring the police's voices, he continued to move forward, seeing that he was about to break out of the encirclement. Around the corner, a sudden gust of wind came in. It turned out that the police helicopter arrived. Spider-Man involuntarily looked up, and his eyes were suddenly stunned by the sun. Reaching out to block the sunlight, a bullet flew over and hit Parker, who couldn't react. If this is a live ammunition, it is impossible to say that Spider-Man will be popular. After all, Parker is not like Fang Tian, completely ignoring bullets. He is still flesh and blood, and he will still be injured if he is shot head-on. Fortunately, the police tried to capture Spider-Man alive, so it was an electric bomb. The electric projectile emitted a dazzling electric current, and Parker convulsed and fell out of midair in free fall. Spider-Man lay on the ground, motionless, as if he had been electrocuted. The police on the building slid down a rope and surrounded Parker on the ground from all sides. At this moment, Parker suddenly bounced off the ground and slashed at a policeman with a hand knife. The policeman flew upside down, crashed into the vehicle behind, and stopped moving. The surrounding police were shocked and tried to raise their guns and aim, but at such a close distance, these actions are only in vain. In the blink of an eye, the police were already lying on the ground. Episode 23. With Spider-Man's strength, if you want to kill, there will be no living people on the ground at this time. However, in the face of humans, he subconsciously converged his power and did not burst out his fist power of more than 10 tons. Otherwise, even if these policemen are wearing body armor, they will also be stopped and beaten in two. Looking at the policeman lying on the ground and the smashed car, he was about to turn and leave, when a familiar voice sounded behind him. Don't move, raise your hand, you have been arrested. This voice Parker knew, was Gwen's father, Chief George. The chief of the bureau said in a fierce voice, This time it is a live ammunition, it was hit, and it will never be spared, you have to think about it. Parker slowly raised his hand. Listen to my explanation, you must let me go. Where will George listen to him? He came over with a gun in one hand and handcuffs in the other. Parker tripped over the police and delayed for a long time. Professor Lizard, who took a step back, was attracted away by Parker and rushed smoothly to the Osborn mansion. On the way, Professor Lizard also encountered sporadic police obstruction. But Professor Lizard was not as soft-hearted as Parker. He shot ruthlessly, because there was only one lizard potion left on his body, and naturally it would not be wasted on them. So these policemen were beaten by Professor Lizard, and fragments of internal organs sprayed all over the ground, and none of them were spared. In front of the Osborn building, Professor Lizard looked at the familiar scene around him. The glass light on the outside of the building can be seen, and inside the building, a female figure is projected out of thin air, introducing the latest achievements of Osborn Enterprise in a soft voice, full of sci-fi feeling. The familiar figure went in and out, but did not leave any waves in his cold heart. Professor Lizard roared and rushed head-on into the building. Suddenly, a humanoid lizard that was extremely strong and 2 people tall broke through the bulletproof glass door and rushed in. The originally busy but orderly Osborn building was in chaos, and screams were everywhere. Since the last time Fang Tian disguised himself as Professor Lizard and attacked the Osborn building, the security forces inside the building have strengthened a lot. But under the powerful power of Professor Lizard, these security personnel are just delivering dishes. 10 minutes later, the assembled security personnel were dead and wounded. In the hall, blood flowed and stump was everywhere. At some point, someone sounded the evacuation alarm inside the building. In the shrill sound of the siren, Professor Lizard was covered in blood and his face was hideous. Ignoring the fleeing staff, the professor walked in the direction of the laboratory familiarly. The fleeing crowd saw Professor Lizard as if they saw the devil. It wasn't until the professor turned a blind eye that the men breathed a sigh of relief and continued to flee outside the building. It wasn't long before the professor had already found the canary device. He was relieved to see that the device was safe and sound. He muttered, "Citizens of New York City, rejoice that I have met such a great scientist as me. From now on, everyone will be equal, and disability will no longer exist in you. Besides, you can still get such a strong and perfect body. Isn't it 100 times more than before?" At this time, in the building, except for the shrill siren sound and flickering lights, there was no one else's figure. He said, carrying the canary equipment over and over again, striding towards the roof. Hundreds of kilograms of steel creation, in his hands, are like a straw, not enough weight. At this time, Spider-Man in the distance is still trying to explain the seriousness of the matter to Sheriff George. Sheriff George turned a deaf ear only as he was talking nonsense. After all, what happened during this time, with Fang Tian's participation, was already somewhat unrecognizable. For example, the relationship between Gwen and Spider-Man has not developed as it did before. Therefore, Sheriff George is not as familiar with Parker as he originally was. Gwen herself was not involved in this matter. In other words, the antidote that should have been created by Gwen now does not exist. Not to mention, if it weren't for Fang Tian's intentional connivance, where would Professor Lizard get the canary equipment to carry out his dream of transforming the world? Seeing that he couldn't explain it to Sheriff George, things were getting worse and worse. Spider-Man is ready to strike regardless of it. Suddenly, the walkie-talkie on the sheriff's waist rang. As soon as the sheriff pressed the walkie-talkie, an anxious voice came from inside. "Chief, the big thing is not good. A large green lizard suddenly burst out of the sewers, extremely ferocious, and our brother was killed and injured." Sheriff George was dumbfounded. "What did you say?" The other side seemed to have received some news, and a faint voice came out. After a few seconds, the voice that came out became even more anxious. "The latest news, that green-skinned monster has rushed into the Osborn mansion, killing and injuring dozens of people. The people in the building have been evacuated, and Osborn Enterprises is urgently calling for police help." Episode 24. Listening to the report, Sheriff George looked solemn, turning his head in the direction of Spider-Man. "That green-skinned monster, the lizard professor you said, was transformed by Dr. Connors of Osborn Corporation?" The conversation just now, Parker listened clearly on the sidelines, and he was anxious. He nodded repeatedly. "Sheriff, I must rush over immediately. If Professor Lizard gets canary equipment, things will get out of control, and all the people in New York will be unlucky." Sheriff George looked at him anxiously. "Not fake. In addition, the most urgent thing at this time is to arrest or kill Professor Lizard, compared to the Spider-Man's matter." Therefore, he only hesitated slightly, then nodded and replied, "I didn't see you today, you go." When Parker heard this, he didn't care to say anything, and the spider silk shot out and soared into the air. To say that after Fang Tian, the only better aspect in this matter is that this time Spider-Man's leg was not shot by the police, and his action was still agile. At this time, Fang Tian also rushed to the location of the Osborn mansion. Having indulged Professor Lizard for so long, seeing that it was about to come to harvest, how could he not go? On the way, Fang Tian called Gwen. To say that now, among the people Fang Tian cares about in this world, Gwen is also one of them. After the phone was connected, without waiting for Gwen to ask, Fang Tian said directly, "Gwen, where are you now?" Gwen was a little puzzled. What happened? After I separated from you, I went home, and I am at home now. Is there anything you want me to help with? Look at the crowds coming and going around. Thinking about the human tragedy that might happen later, Fang Tian's heart did not fluctuate. Just said to Gwen, "Yes, I have something very important to ask you for help. Can you promise me first?" Gwen said, "What's going on?" "I promised, you can rest assured to leave the matter to me. I will definitely handle it." Fang Tian said, "Today all day, you and your family will stay at home, close the doors and windows, and use tape to seal the gaps in the room. It would be better if you could get a gas mask, bring a gas mask and do not go out." Listening to Fang Tian's solemn tone, Gwen had a bad premonition in her heart, but she knew that she was afraid that she would not be able to help anything in this matter, and not dragging Fang Tian back was the best help, so she directly agreed. After solving Gwen's matter, Fang Tian can be regarded as having no worries. I randomly found a mask to attach to my face and rushed in the direction of the Osborne building at full speed. Spider-Man ended up coming late. By the time he ascended to the roof of the Osborne building, Professor Lizard had already loaded the potion into the canary apparatus. Seeing Spider-Man climb upstairs, he laughed maniacally. "Parker, this time, can't stop me." In the voice, "The launch button of the canary device has been pressed." I saw the lizard potion in canary's equipment spinning rapidly and being launched into the air. With a muffled bang, the potion in the sky exploded, forming a billowing green cloud. The green cloud spread around, and on the way, the medicine mist gradually drifted down. Pedestrians on the side of the road looked up at the green mist falling from the sky, and reached out curiously to touch it. Something horrible happened. In a tooth-biting sound, green scales spread from the fingers and covered the man's entire body. The man rolled around in fear, but after the scales covered his body, he calmed down. When I opened my eyes, I saw a lizard-like vertical tree. He stroked his scaly body obsessively and howled. At this time, he was not the only one who had changed. It's hundreds, thousands. As far as the eye can see, all the exposed pedestrians have turned into humanoid lizards. On the roof of the Osborne building, Professor Lizard laughed. "Look, poor Parker. These are my companions. Now, they are all equal. How perfect is this? Have you experienced it?" Spider-Man looked around, also a little dazed. Unexpectedly, things eventually developed to this point. "Now, how do you solve this problem?" Without having time to think about it, Professor Lizard had already rushed over. Parker had to fight back and forth with Professor Lizard. At this time, Spider-Man is intact and can fully exert his strength. But that's it, he still gradually fell into the downside, just relying on the superior reach to deal with Professor Lizard. Parker's fist is heavy, and Professor Lizard's fist is even heavier. 1 or 20 tons of force hit the professor, which only made him cry out in pain, and it couldn't do much damage. Spider Silk can only bring some harassment to professors. Spider-Man doesn't have any powerful moves, and things will get worse and worse when you think about it. Thinking of the news that Director George got on the intercom that Professor Lizard had slaughtered dozens of people, plus the surrounding scene, made Parker make up his mind. He wanted the professor to be taught a lesson in blood. Episode 25. Not to mention Spider-Man's determination, Fang Tian had already arrived at the Osborne mansion at this time. He didn't rush up to confront Professor Lizard. Fang Tian let Professor Lizard act. In addition to wanting him to successfully launch the potion and refine more lizards, he also had another purpose. That was the looting of the Osborne building. Osborne Mansion has a lot of good things. The main components of the Spider Silk launcher used by Spider-Man are produced by Osborne Enterprises, and there should be a lot of storage here. Coupled with the super spider that mutates Parker, the rhinoceros mecha that will appear in the future, and the green goblin suit that I don't know if there is one, these are all things that Fang Tian covets. Osborne is also a giant, and in a capitalist society like the United States, its influence is huge. Didn't you see the steel armor in Iron Man's hand, something that the government coveted, but never got his hands on it? This is the expression of Stark Industries' enormous influence. If this thing were in the hands of an ordinary person, it would have been forcefully obtained by the government. Fang Tian still has to live in the United States. Usually it is not good to offend this kind of capital giant, but now, there is chaos. Who cares about him? Spider-Man fights on the roof. Fang Tian was very happy in the building. This thing is a spider silk launcher? A piece of fingernail-sized stuff that can spray hundreds of meters of tough spider silk is indeed a good thing. Take it. The space inside the body is rolling, and the spider silk emitters placed in the storage room have disappeared. A few minutes later, Fang Tian appeared again in the room where the super spider was cultivated. Looking at the spiders densely crawling on the spider silk, Fang Tian also trembled slightly. With a wave of his hand, pieces of spiders disappeared out of thin air, and after a while, the room was empty. Feeling the power of growth, Fang Tian couldn't help but smile. Since he advanced to the second-order lower grade, that is, the lower-grade magic weapon, refining dozens of people from the Hell Gang, plus a mutant pulse of unknown level. There is a fight with Professor Lizard, and during the battle, he deliberately seeks to beat him and does not dodge the professor's attacks. In the end, he even pulled out more than a dozen tails of the professor to refine. Coupled with today's harvest, he has been silently promoted to the middle-grade magic weapon on the way to action. In Fang Tian's induction, after being promoted to the mid-grade magic weapon, not only did his defense, strength, and speed increase a little, but now he was able to hold a second rune in his body. In other words, he can have one more special ability, but now there is no hurry to choose, or wait until today's World War I has passed. After harvesting the spider silk launcher and super spider, Fang Tian searched for it again. After a while, I finally found the rhinoceros mecha. It is a pity that in the future, the mighty rhinoceros mecha is still only a semi-finished product at this time, and it is obviously not fully developed. Fang Tian did not dislike it either, and swallowed it in one gulp. The effect was good, and he increased the power of more than a dozen people. Before leaving, Fang Tian saw the X-ray camera introduced by Professor Connors when he visited the laboratory, and it is said that there is only one in the world. Simply, he brought the lab to a pot. Legend has it that this is the only X-ray camera in the world. Looking at the empty laboratory, he smiled with satisfaction. Only then did he turn around and head to the roof. On the rooftop, Parker is determined to teach the lizard a profound lesson. Spider-Man doesn't seem to have any lethal skills, but in fact, it's just a misunderstanding. Among his abilities, there is an inconspicuous but very practical ability, which is electrostatic adsorption. Electrostatic adsorption allows Spider-Man to adsorb to various materials and is the basis for his cornices. Little is known that this ability can also be used in combat. The two sides remain deadlocked. During the battle, Parker crisscrossed the way. Finally, the opportunity came. Taking advantage of the professor's foot on the central air conditioning exhaust fan on the roof, standing unsteadily, Spider-Man shot out and jumped behind the professor. Fists slammed into his scaly back. Logically, these two punches made the professor stagger at most, but this time it was different. Parker's fist seemed to be glued to the professor's back, and he kicked it with both legs and bent his knees. With a stabbing sound, the 2-foot square scales and a large piece of flesh and blood were torn apart. Rao is a professor with a huge body, and it is not good to suffer this blow. A bloody piece on the back, no good meat in sight. Blood fountains spilled from torn muscles, and the professor howled in pain. A torn wound is the most difficult to recover, let alone such a large piece. With the professor's resilience, his eyes turned black and he almost fell to the ground. It is precisely because this trick is too ferocious that Spider-Man rarely uses it. This was supposed to be a great opportunity, but Spider-Man did not take the opportunity to attack. He knew that the lizard in front of him was Dr. Connors, or he was nostalgic about the old feelings, trying to awaken the professor's consciousness. Professor, you wake up, this is not your intention. Don't you have great ideals? Look around, what have you caused? Episode 26. The professor has been furiously made by this heart-wrenching pain. Where can he listen to the advice? Open your eyes are bloodshot, and they are filled with monstrous killing intent, which is irrational. Spider-Man misses the opportunity, and Professor Lizard howls up to the sky. This howl seems to be different from before, full of anger and change. As far as the eye could see, all the humanoid lizards that heard the professor's howl were in turmoil. They listened as if they had heard some command. In an instant, all the lizards rushed over beyond the Osborn building. Parker watched this scene, his scalp numb, helpless. At this moment, a voice sounded. Parker, how long have you been here? How is the situation? Parker's eyes lit up. Wasn't it Fang Tian? Remembering Fang Tian's powerful strength, he had some confidence. After Spider-Man finished talking about the situation in 2 words, Fang Tian frowned. It seems that we are going to act separately again. Parker was a little puzzled, looking at the surrounding situation. It is better for us to join forces against the enemy. Fang Tian explained, my defense is strong, and you know that even if there are more of these lizards, they can't help me. You, on the other hand, should know how to make the lizard potion antidote. Parker's eyes flashed with excitement. With the antidote, plus the canary equipment, today's scene will be saved. Fang Tian nodded. Seeing that the situation was critical, Spider-Man didn't care what he was saying, nodded with Fang Tian, and swung downstairs. A smile flashed in Fang Tian's eyes, and he said to himself, Parker, all the equipment in the Osborn mansion has been swallowed by me, so I should be able to delay a little longer. These lizards, the more they come, the better. And said that Professor Lizard, seeing that the person who has suffered a big loss is going to escape, where is Kenny? Lunged over. Before he upgraded, Fang Tian could press Professor Lizard to the ground and beat him wildly, and now he has raised a small stage again. How could he put him in his eyes? The figure flashed, blocking in front of the professor. The professor's sanity was not much left at this time, and it seemed that he didn't even know Fang Tian, who had caused him to suffer big losses one after another. Seeing that there was one more person in front of him, his figure kept stopping, and he still pounced. With a crisp sound, Professor Lizard's dagger-like nails hit Fang Tian's body, and it was shattered by the huge power of the two. On Fang Tian's body, only a faint, invisible white mark appeared, and it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Fang Tian received this blow. His figure did not move. He reached out and grabbed the tail that was as thick as a thigh that attacked. It seems that after Professor Lizard injected the potion many times, his strength increased, and the strength on this tail was not small, and Fang Tian was also repelled by a small step, stepping on 2 deep footprints on the roof. Do you really remember to eat or beat, and even your brain has degenerated? This forgets the previous lesson, forcefully tore off the professor's tail and rolled into the space to refine. Fang Tian squinted his eyes comfortably. At this time, the sky was still filled with green medicinal mist, which seemed to have improved the professor's resilience a lot. In the blink of an eye, another tail has grown. A large piece of flesh and blood that had been torn apart on his back had also been completely restored. Seeing this, Fang Tian's eyes lit up, but he didn't expect that the green mist in the sky still had this function. It seems that today's harvest will be even greater than expected. With a glance, Professor Lizard suffered a small loss, and he cautiously walked around Fang Tian, seemingly looking for an opportunity. At this moment, a harsh sound sounded, like iron nails cutting hard through the glass, making people hear toothache. It turned out that there were already lizards climbing up below. Behind Fang Tian, a green-skinned lizard that was more than 1 person tall poked out its head. Seeing Fang Tian's back to him, he thought it was a good opportunity, so he immediately pounced and grabbed the back of Fang Tian's head. At the same time, the lizard professor in front of him also pounced, and his claws pierced the interviewer's eyes. Fang Tian was not confused in the slightest, ignoring the attacks before and after, and the green dragon swung its tail and stepped on the chest of the lizard behind him. The black shadow in front of him was getting bigger and bigger, as if heaven and earth were obscured, and Fang Tian didn't seem to have time to blink, and he was already pierced in the eyeball by the professor's claw. In the next instant, the smile on the professor's face froze. There was another crisp sound, and Fang Tian was unharmed. Fang Tian just blinked his eyes, feeling that his eyes were a little sour. As for the lizard that was hit by a green dragon tail behind him, where is his life? The heart burst on the spot, and the dead could not die more. Even, Fang Tian still had the spare time to open the space in his body, sucked him in, and refined it in the blink of an eye. A human who has turned into a lizard mob, and the effect is extraordinary. This one is worthy of 3 or 4 ordinary people, and it is not in vain to plan a battle. You know, at this time, all the lizards are densely gathered downstairs, why not hundreds or thousands? Ordinary humans, he will not go to massacre. These lizards are different. Even in law, there is the concept of legitimate defense. Although no amount of lizards could hurt Fang Tian, it did not mean that Fang Tian was so merciful and allowed them to attack. Episode 27. Who is Fang Tian? Nothing else has to happen, let alone a great opportunity like this. In his eyes, those lizards that changed later did not even have the qualifications to reuse, so they had to break their roots once. Moreover, Professor Lizard pierced Fang Tian's eyes, but seeing Fang Tian's unconcerned look, his eyes were almost glaring, and his face was full of disbelief. Trembling pointed at Fang Tian. How is it possible? My nails can pierce steel, how can it not even hurt your eyes? Fang Tian naturally wouldn't explain. Did he want him to tell the enemy that he was covered in the body, inside and out, and there was no weakness? He has not yet exposed his whole cards to the enemy's thoughts. Therefore, he just ticked his little finger contemptuously. The professor was a little surprised, looked at the dozens of lizards that had climbed up, and regained his confidence. No matter how strong you are, how many of the hundreds of thousands of compatriots around me can you beat? Fang Tian chuckled. Hundreds of thousands of ants. What kind of trouble can they cause? Hearing this, Professor Lizard roared angrily and besieged dozens of lizards around him. Professor Lizard's attack had a good effect. Plus, if the professor died, Fang Tian didn't know if so many lizards would disperse. Therefore, the attack on the professor was ignored and endured alive. Just at the sight of an opportunity, they grabbed one of his tails and roared angrily. These later mutated lizards are naturally much stronger than ordinary people, and with good resilience, they will give the police with firearms a headache. If Spider-Man is here, with his heart, he will definitely not kill him, and he will also feel very tricky. But in Fang Tian's eyes, these people are really just ants, and they can be killed at will, and they can't cause any trouble. It wasn't long before Professor Lizard's tail had been torn off 20 or 30 times, causing him to roar angrily. In the diffuse medicinal mist, his resilience was indeed much higher. Last time at school, his tail was only broken a dozen times, and his recovery slowed down. Today, the professor still has no fatigue. Randomly pumped on the waist of a flapping lizard, the crisp sound of bones breaking remembered that his body had become an acute angle, crawling on the ground to fight for his life. Fang Tian did not give him this opportunity, sucked this lizard into the space in his body, and refined it in one breath. It is also Fang Tian's weak suction in space at this time, which is why it is so troublesome, and he also needs to fight the enemy powerlessly to resist in order to suck it in and refine. Otherwise, as long as the space is opened, aren't these swooping lizards sending him vegetables? There were already hundreds of lizards killed by Fang Tian, and the figures on the rooftop were not missing at all, but more and more, densely packed everywhere. Then again, thanks to Fang Tian's fast refining speed, otherwise, with so many lizards killed, his expanded body space would not be able to fit it. All the corpses were pulled into the space by Fang Tian to refine, but it was inevitable that a large amount of blood would spray out, flowing around like a stream on the rooftop. As the killing continued, blood had spilled out of the confines of the rooftop, running down the glass facade. The entire Osborne building was dyed red. On the blood-red building, there are green dots crawling, which are humans who have turned into lizards. Seeing that Fang Tian was fighting more and more courageously, the lizards around him were still full of murderous faces, and they did not mean to be afraid at all. Lizards are cold-blooded animals, where is there any fear of this? In addition, these people have been blinded by the killing intent, and naturally, they will not be afraid. Fang Tian was in the lizard swarm, crisscrossing and walking, as if entering a no-man's land. The Osborne building has been destroyed. Suddenly, the entire rooftop collapsed and smashed on the next floor. By accident, many lizards fell from the roof, and the sugar gourd brought down a bunch, all of which were smashed into meatloaf. Instead of being afraid, these lizards howled and became more violent. Professor Lizard looked at Fang Tian's invincible appearance, and there was a retreat in his heart. Looking at the body that disappeared inexplicably, his eyes lit up, as if there was some way. He also didn't attack Fang Tian in the crowd, hiding in the lizard swarm, casually cutting the head of a subordinate next to him in half, grabbed the lizard's body, tore off a piece of flesh and blood, and chewed it with a mouthful of blood. It worked. The green color on the lizard's scales became more and more obvious, and his figure gradually swelled, and his elbows, knees, back, and even thick bone spurs gradually grew. As he kept hunting, his body, which was originally somewhat human-like, became less and less human-like. These lizards on the roof were killed by the two sides and soon died. The rest of the lizards, at this time, are also afraid. Looking at the appearance of their leader, they seem to have some doubts. Is this really their leader? At this time, there were already about 200 lizards refined by Fang Tian, plus those who were brutally killed by Professor Lizard, and the ground was covered with blood and severed limbs, which were extremely slippery, and the smell of blood rushed straight into the sky. Episode 28. Quietly, after refining nearly 200 lizards, coupled with the heart attack of Professor Lizard, Fang Tian had been promoted to the level of a top-grade magic weapon. Even, it is not far from the level of magic weapons. The magic weapon is only comparable to the cultivators of the Foundation building period, and when the body evolves to the level of magic weapons, it is comparable to the cultivators of the golden pill period. A golden pill swallowed into my stomach, my life is up to me. The golden pill mentioned here is not the golden pill of the dam broken into a baby and turned into the Yuan god, but the golden pill of the avenue, the foundation of the avenue. Jingdan Cheng, from now on, has been polished until Jingdan is completed and becomes an immortal. In other words, this stage is already the last step before becoming an immortal. As for those extra steps, it was just because the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was gradually exhausted, and the descendants found another way to redivide it in order to cultivate immortals. In ancient times, where were there any Yuan babies? The Chaos Treasure Book practiced by Fang Tian was the highest refining treasure code that had been passed down from the ancient period, and naturally followed the steps of the ancient period. There is no superiority between the two, but the methods are different. It is precisely because between the two steps, the span is too large. If you want to improve in the future, it will not be as simple as it is now. This is something that needs to be considered after promotion. The urgent need now is to solve the lizard professor, who has changed greatly in front of him. At this time, the lizard professor, covered in bone spurs, muscles graved, 7 or 8 meters high, is no longer human-shaped. It roared, and the lizards around it scattered. Power, that's my power. So powerful, who else can stop me? Fang Tian chuckled. Don't measure yourself. Professor Lizard's fist-sized eyes rolled around. He seemed to regain some sanity and recognized Fang Tian. Fang Tian? Parker's classmates? Fang Tian said, unexpectedly, my head has become bigger, and my IQ has recovered a lot. It is me. It looked around and looked at the pool of blood and the severed arm under its feet. What happened? Before the question was finished, it suddenly held its head, screamed, its voice was sharp, and the tempered glass on the exterior wall of the building was shaken out of cracks. Fang Tian looked at this scene and secretly said in his heart, the strength has increased a lot. I hope that after the first battle, I can be promoted. That's the last role you can play. After the scream, the professor suddenly raised his head, his eyes were full of murder, and he was no longer clear. I remembered, it was you. I pulled out my tail dozens of times. Today, you are dead. No one can save you. Fang Tian had just advanced at this time, and his strength had increased, even if Professor Lizard had greatly increased his strength. But what was he afraid of? Mother-in-law, like a mother. While saying, Fang Tian also straightened his little finger and turned downward. Professor Lizard, Professor Dragon had a mouth full of fangs and pounced without a word. After evolution, its strength is incomparable. With both legs kicked, the ceiling has broken a big hole, and the 7 or 8 meter tall body with a vicious wind pounced on Fang Tian. Fang Tian was not afraid in the slightest, and also used his arms to hold the huge palm it blasted into. Unexpectedly, its power was too great. With a boom, Fang Tian had already smashed through the ceiling, and the remaining momentum continued, and it crashed through the outer wall and flew down from the 200 or 300 meters high Osborne building. Fang Tian is not Spider-Man. He can't spray spider silk. He is in midair. He can't make it out with all his strength, and the meteorite generally smashed on the ground. Fortunately, his physical strength is also not comparable to Spider-Man, falling from a height of 200 or 300 meters, and only smashing a deep pit on the ground, but he is unscathed, just gray and a little embarrassed. In the pit, Fang Tian shouted, "Cool, this is strong enough." Professor Lizard had dealt with Fang Tian for so long, and he knew that he would not die so easily. Throwing out this blow, it chased it directly from upstairs, without mercy. He will not fly, relying on tough flesh. A monster 7 or 8 meters tall fell from a height of 300 meters. What kind of power is that? It's like a god. This godlike figure was now smashing towards Fang Tian. Great opportunity. Of course, Fang Tian will not dodge. With both palms up, blocking the big feet that fall from the sky. With a loud noise, the pit several meters deep deepened 5 or 6 times, and the groundwater fountain spewed up. This kick drove Fang Tian into the ground like a nail, and at the end, he didn't let him go, twisted it on the ground repeatedly, and then leapt from the top of Fang Tian's head. With a bang, muddy water splashed everywhere, and a figure emerged from the ground. When he got off the ground, he first snorted twice and spit out a mouthful of dirt. "This is enough, this is what I want." Fang Tian was still there talking to himself, and Professor Lizard's big palm had already grabbed it, pinching his head, like grabbing a small worm, and smashing it everywhere. When it was the turn of the car, the body was smashed into a discus. It was the turn of the column, cement splashed everywhere, steel bars flew around. After enough addiction, the professor slammed Fang Tian to the ground and gasped. Episode 29. Rao is the physique of the lizard professor's second evolution, and after performing these movements, he still gasped, and it can be seen that it has exhausted its full strength. After receiving this blow, Fang Tian felt like a sauna, extremely comfortable. It didn't take long before the professor's attack suddenly stopped. Fang Tian opened his eyes in dissatisfaction, looked at Professor Lizard who was panting in place, and involuntarily complained, "Sure enough, it's an old man. People are not satisfied, this is withering." The scales of the lizard's chi seemed to stand up, and the bone spurs on his body also came out with heat. Fang Tian's eyes lit up. It seems that when fighting with men in the future, you can mock this aspect more. It seems to be more useful than other taunts. Fang Tian was distracted in the battle, and Professor Lizard would not be polite. Perhaps it was Fang Tian who mocked the reason why he had withered. The professor actually bent his arm and stabbed Fang Tian between his legs with an extremely sharp bone spur with his elbow. With this moment, Fang Tian fell into the ground from the middle of his body, and his head and feet were raised high. If it weren't for Fang Tianhuan's body, all of them were integrated, and there was no difference in defense power, he would really become a eunuch at this moment. Although it didn't hurt, that part was attacked, and Fang Tian was also a little angry. Seeing that the professor did not adhere to it, and seemed to attack the same part, Fang Tian finally moved. I saw him jump up and jump to the same height as the professor. A whip leg has already been thrown in the face of the professor. This whip leg, Fang Tian has already used all his strength. According to Professor Lizard, he does not have the strength before the second evolution. Perhaps at this time, his head has turned 360 degrees from his neck and fell directly. But at this time it was just a big hole in the professor's cheekbone. After the professor's evolution, it seems that even his resilience has improved a lot, and in the blink of an eye, most of his injuries have recovered. Fang Tian didn't care either. He was just attacked by the professor in important parts and was angry in his heart, so he took a small revenge. Not really wanted to kill the professor. If you kill the professor now, where to find such a good sparring partner? A few small injuries, most of them recovered in the blink of an eye. But who could not be angry when he was slapped in the face by Fang Tian? Unless he is a saint, Professor Lizard is not a saint. On the contrary, he is very hot-tempered. Fang Tian had just attacked him, and before he landed, the professor's counterattack came. The body turned sideways, and the tail of the pillar slammed into Fang Tian's waist in midair. Fang Tian spun, and the cannonballs generally flew out. The body that flew out knocked a large hole in the waist of a water tanker and crashed into the counter of the bank next to it, before stopping. Banknotes flew all over the sky and spilled all over the ground. Fang Tian casually grabbed one, real banknotes. Isn't this nonsense? Inside the bank counter, where will counterfeit banknotes be stored? Professor Lizard had already followed him in. Fang Tian waved the bill in his hand towards Professor Lizard. "Hey, big lizard over there, let's discuss. I'll give you $100. How about you hit me a few more times?" Without saying a word, Professor Lizard pinched Fang Tian's arm and kicked him out like a ball. As for the $100 bill, it is naturally crushed and does not save a bit. The professor bent down and walked out of the bank, and Fang Tian was already waiting for him at the door. Fist with both hands, a cannon pound, hammer on the toes of Professor Lizard. Flesh and blood are muddled and mixed together. With a whimper, Professor Lizard jumped up sharply, slammed his upper body through the ceiling of the bank, and hung there and wobbled. Although it can recover, it does not mean that it does not hurt. Suddenly a toe is broken, and everyone has to jump. Great opportunity, but Fang Tian did not grasp it, watching the professor break free. Since you don't collect money, then take this as my reward for you. He had already felt that it was not much closer to the breakthrough, so he was determined to provoke Professor Lizard and make it a little harder. The professor was really even more angry. Sweeping his arm, Fang Tian flew out along with a large piece of land. In midair, Fang Tian stretched out comfortably before falling heavily on the ground. Before he got up, amid the squeaking sound, Professor Lizard dragged the water tanker over. Without saying a word, he picked up the water tanker and slammed it. The remnants of the water overflowed, turning the surrounding area into a mud swamp. At this moment, in the mud, a fire suddenly rose, turning the entire car into molten iron. Together with one of the professor's arms, it also turned into coke and fell. It has not yet landed, and halfway through, it has already vaporized without a trace. The mud swamps all over the ground also turned into magma, which gradually solidified as the fire retracted. In the magma, a figure covered in light walked out. "Ah, this massage, it's really refreshing. My bones were relaxed a lot." What came out of it was Fang Tian after the advance. That fire was naturally the new ability that Fang Tian had generated after he advanced. This fire, if nothing else, is exactly the 3 true fires practiced by mixing the 3 treasures of the essence and spirit of the human body. If the water is not extinguished, how can the residual water in a water tanker be helped? Episode 30. After Fang Tian was promoted to the body of a 3rd-order magic weapon, it was like a cultivator forming a golden pill, and his spirit and spirit were seamlessly integrated, and the 3 flames naturally ignited. These 3 realities of true fire were also naturally evolved from the advanced stage of the body, and they were closely combined with his previous abilities, making his refining ability even stronger. For example, before he advanced, Fang Tian's refining ability may not be able to refine the Edmund alloy that makes up Wolverine's claws, but now, with the original refining power, coupled with the smelting of the Samadhi true fire, refining the Edmund alloy is not a dream. There is also a more important ability, that is, the power of refining can already be released. What is burned into ash by the Samadhi true fire will naturally be absorbed into the body, which is equivalent to being refined. Of course, in the process, there will be some losses, and the loss is about 2%, which is not as perfect as the refining of space in the body. There are other wonderful uses, which will not be detailed here, and will be discussed later. The most important thing at this time is to refine the lizard professor in front of him first, because Fang Tian has seen that a shadow faintly appeared in the distance, not Spider-Man Peter Parker, who else could it be? When he spreads the antidote, who knows what will change? Therefore, Fang Tian was ready for a quick victory. Caught in the flames, he lost an arm in the blink of an eye, and Professor Lizard stood aside, puzzled. With such a powerful ability, why didn't he use it early in the morning, but let him attack for so long? Fang Tian seemed to see his doubts. "Parker is coming, you will not be long dead. It is useless to know so much. It is better to go to hell with doubts." I didn't see him accumulating power, and in an instant, Fang Tian had already appeared behind Professor Lizard. Reaching out and grabbing it, he grabbed the professor's tail and pulled it down, and collected it into the body space refining. If you can save a little, save a little. Parker was already about to come over. Fang Tian couldn't be in front of Spider-Man, and let the professor 7 or 8 meters tall disappear, so he had to use the Samadhi true fire to refine him. Inevitably, 2% of the essence will be lost. In an instant, the professor hadn't even noticed Fang Tian's figure, and his tail had disappeared. It was shocked in its heart. Could it be a new ability that had not been used? This question, he will never have the opportunity to ask. Because Fang Tian's figure flashed, it had already appeared in front of the professor's eyes. I saw that his arm was covered with 3 colored flames, like a hot knife cutting butter, and it was inserted smoothly, directly into the depth of his elbow. In less than a second, the professor's brain pulp had been roasted by the real fire. The eye part also became a large black hole, like pushing the golden mountain and pouring the jade pillar. Professor Lizard's 7 or 8 meter tall body fell backwards, kicking up a cloud of dust. No matter how strong his resilience was, he would never get up again. Samadhi, true fire, can even burn the soul and spirit. The soul is gone, how can the body recover? Until the professor arrived, Spider-Man just arrived in time. Looking at the hideous and terrifying body in front of him, he was a little incredulous. This is the professor? What's going on? As he spoke, the flames in the professor's eyes had spread and spread all over his body. More than 10 seconds later, its huge corpse had turned into a small pile of black ash, scattered in the wind. Since then, there has been no more lizard professor this person. Fang Tian only felt a huge amount of essence energy pouring into his body. If he obtained this essence chi at the magic weapon stage, at least he could be promoted from the level of the lower grade magic weapon to the upper grade magic weapon in one breath. But for him at the magic weapon level, it's just a drop in the bucket. Feeling the power surging and reverberating in his body, Fang Tian replied, "You also saw it, this is the professor." Parker looked at the ruins around him, and the blood-stained Osborne mansion, and didn't know what to say. Finally, he pointed to the blood-red Osborne building. "What about that?" Fang Tian said, "It's blood, the blood of the citizens of New York City, who turned into lizards." maybe 300, or maybe 400. Some of them were killed by me in battle, and I can't control my power all the time. Everything else is eaten by the professor, and the professor is precisely because of this that it will become what you see." After a moment of silence, "So it is, so it is." Parker muttered to himself and comforted Fang Tian again. "You don't beat yourself up, it's also inevitable. If it weren't for you, I don't know how many casualties it would cause, even thousands, tens of thousands. It is possible. These people died, all due to the ambition of the professor." Fang Tian saw Parker silent, and thought what the reason was, but he didn't expect that he was organizing rhetoric and comforting himself. He is now almost happy to sing loudly. Where is there any self-blame? Speaking of which, most of this matter is because of his connivance that it has developed to this point. However, he did not mean to blame himself in the slightest.